Bobby, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So when it comes to the most highly anticipated fight of 2019, at least so far, I told you guys since this fight was signed, even before the fight was signed, that I thought Mikey Garcia was going to be one of Errol Spence's toughest fights, if not his toughest fight, because of how technically sound and accurate Mikey Garcia is. On top of all of that, he has deceptive power. And I'll talk a little bit more about his power later on. But before I do, I want to get into what Errol Spence's trainer, Derrick James, had to say about Mikey Garcia, because clearly he agrees with my assessment when it comes to Garcia. Errol Spence trainer Derrick James, he believes that Mikey Garcia is technically the best fighter that Errol Spence has ever faced. And that's over fighters like Kell Brook, who I believe was a very good technical fighter. So this is what Derrick James had to say about Mikey Garcia in comparison to all of Errol Spence's past opponents. Quote, "I know Mikey's a smart, intelligent fighter, and it's obvious he knows there's a huge task ahead of him, so he's doing everything he can to be successful. I think everything he's doing will help him, and I applaud him for all his efforts. Lamont Peterson, Kell Brook, and Chris Algieri were all great champions. But Mikey's more technical than all of these guys, and that's the difference. Mikey 100% believes in himself, and he's operating with a great resume. He's a very cerebral fighter who poses a threat like all the other guys. Obviously, they feel like they see something, and we're going to come in as the best Errol Spence possible. We're going to go in and showcase who we are and why people say the things that they say about us." End quote. You know, I find all this really interesting because yesterday I just did a video and I was talking about what Robert Garcia just recently said about Errol Spence. How he basically said, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be an easy fight. Errol Spence is a bad MFer. And of course he closed out with saying, but I believe that Mikey Garcia is going to win the fight. Now you have Errol Spence's trainer giving Mikey Garcia the same level of respect that Robert Garcia was giving Errol Spence. This is a real fight, guys. This is a real fight. This is going to be a very competitive fight, once again, for the 1,000th time. I want to go back and talk about Mikey Garcia's power. I told you guys a second ago that I thought he had some of the most deceptive power going into this fight. A lot of people don't know this, but Mikey Garcia, he had knocked down and cracked Maidana's ribs in sparring while Maidana was preparing for Floyd Mayweather. When I went down to Mikey Garcia's gym and covered him, I talked to some of his sparring partners. These were middleweights, and they were telling me that he was the hardest puncher they had been in the ring with, sparring. Of course, this is with bigger gloves and headgear. And Brandon Rios, who also has worked with Mikey Garcia, he said some of the same things. But I'm not just taking their word when they talk about how hard of a puncher Mikey Garcia is. I'm also looking at his fights. I'm looking at how his opponents are reacting to the power, or even been in the ring with Mikey Garcia. I've heard a lot of fans say Mikey Garcia, he can't have that much power because he couldn't even knock out Broner or Robert Easter. But if you watch those fights close enough, what you guys will see is Robert Easter and Adrian Broner, they fought more cautious against Mikey Garcia than they had ever fought in their entire career. So if you're fighting that cautious, obviously you're making sure you don't get knocked out in a fight like that. But then we seen when Mikey Garcia, when he fought against Zatichinen came forward and he got knocked out in the second round. And Zatichinen was an undefeated fighter. He wasn't just some tomato can. Speaking of Zatichinen, he was a southpaw just like Errol Spence. See, the difference from Errol Spence and Robert Easter and Adrian Broner, well, there are several differences. One of the differences is Errol Spence is a much better fighter. He's much more well-rounded, obviously, than both Broner and Robert Easter. But something else that's different about Errol Spence is not going to shell up. He's not going to fight a cautious fight to where he's just trying to make it 12 rounds. And quite frankly, this is the reason why Mikey Garcia, he chose to fight someone like, or he chose to go after a fighter like Errol Spence, as opposed to fighting someone like a Terrence Crawford. Because Mikey Garcia, he said he didn't want to fight Terrence Crawford because he didn't like his style. Which is high praise to Terrence Crawford when he picks Errol Spence over Terrence Crawford. Mikey Garcia, he obviously believes that a moving target is far more difficult than a stationary target. But with all that being said, I do wonder if Mikey Garcia, if he's underestimating Errol Spence's technical skill. I told you guys before, I truly believe this is a fight where Mikey Garcia will look really, really good in the first half. The question is, how will he look in the second half? I believe that Errol Spence will start to take over in the second half of this fight and possibly start to wear down Mikey Garcia with body shots. As technically sound as Mikey Garcia is, going into this fight, honestly, we really don't know who is more skilled, who's more intelligent. Because once again, man, people do underestimate Errol Spence's intelligence. There's a reason why Manny Pacquiao knocked down Algieri 6 or 7 times and could not finish the job and get him out of there. And yet Errol Spence, he completely obliterates Chris Algieri. There's a reason why Keith Thurman could not get rid of Bundu, but Errol Spence was able to annihilate him and get him out of there. It wasn't with just brute force, it wasn't with power. It was with the selection of punches. Errol Spence, he knows how to set up the knockout. This is why I've been telling you guys for the longest. I believe Errol Spence is one of those rare fighters where he can step up in competition and the knockouts don't evaporate. You notice whenever a fighter steps up in competition, no matter how many knockouts he has, all of a sudden the knockouts usually disappear. And that's because you're facing smarter opponents that aren't making as many mistakes. Errol Spence is so skilled, and with his combination of power, he still finds ways to knock out that higher level of competition. But we'll see. We'll see how Mikey Garcia deals with that power and intelligence and the jab. Let's not forget, Errol Spence, he has an excellent jab. He knows how to set a lot of punches up with his jab. So we'll see what happens, guys. I'm gonna go and wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, and I'm on to the next one.